Guys, it is project term time, and this is one of my favorite times of the year, mainly because I get to do something I really enjoy doing and then teach you guys about it. So one of the things that I'm supposed to be doing this year is teaching a class called Open Flames. I love open flames. Grilling over open flames, so good. Having a campfire, cooking something on a campfire, love it. So what am I doing inside with all this baking stuff? Well, one of the things that I love to do is make grilled pizzas. And it's something I was going to teach all of you to do too, make some grilled pizzas. So I got my son behind the camera right now, he's working that, and we're gonna first learn how to make the dough. Now here's a couple of things. If you're planning on having your pizza in like a half an hour from now, isn't gonna happen. The best dough you can make is dough that sits overnight. All right, so we wanna make sure that we make this dough ahead of time. Let it sit overnight. It doesn't have to, but it definitely needs to raise. If we do this in my class, what we typically do is we'll make this the last thing of one of the nights, and then the next day we come back to it when it's already raised and ready to go. All right, so what we're gonna do today is make the dough. So first thing I wanna do is show you what ingredients go into it. Super simple, all the stuff you can buy at the store, or you might even have in the cupboard already, right? Ask mom about it, ask dad about it, see what they've got ready to go. First thing you gotta have, a package of this, active dry yeast. All right, get yourself a pack of active dry yeast. All it is yeast, but it needs to be activated with water. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is put my active dry yeast in my bowl. Now, if you don't have a fancy stand mixer like this, that's okay. You can make this all in a bowl with just your hands or a spoon too, okay? I've got my fancy mixer, so I'm gonna use my fancy mixer today, but you can stir this too. Now, it's making dough. Dough is gonna get thick, it's gonna get big, it's gonna be hard to stir. It builds muscles, right? Use that. That's a great way to work out. Work out first, eat the calories later, right? Here we go. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get into this active dry yeast, okay? So we're gonna cut this thing open. Be careful, all right? It's like little beads, it's like little pebbles, okay? So you cut the top open, it's gonna go everywhere. So what I do first is you wanna shake the pebbles down, all right? All those little active dry yeasts are in there. It is a living organism, okay? The reason dry yeast is so nice is it eats some of the flour and it activates literally by burping and farting out carbon dioxide. That's what this is doing, that's what yeast is gonna do. And it's causing all these little bubbles to form inside of your dough. So we have to activate this stuff. So here we go, we're gonna put this active dry yeast right into our bowl, okay? And we're gonna follow up with warm water. So I've already got warm water ready to go, and this thing, there are 3 cups in here, all right? If you can't fit 3 cups inside of one thing, don't worry about it. Go ahead and grab your 1 cup measuring cup, go to the faucet, turn it on, wait till it's warm to the touch, right? Put 3 of these bad boys inside here, good to go, okay? You always want the dry yeast in first so that the water actually mixes it for you. I'm not doing any work right now. This water is mixing all of this yeast up for us. Lovely. Okay, cool. That's done. Next thing you gotta do, along with the yeast inside of this thing right now, we wanna start making a texture that's gonna add some flavor to this. All right, so you got in front of me some sugar, all right? Very, very simply, 1 teaspoon, we're gonna add some sugar into this, okay? So here it comes. Most people would say sugar in your dough, you can't do that. Well, I would agree that sugar and dough often makes things sweet, but what you're gonna find is it adds a little bit of more sweetness to the dough that adds good contrast in your mouth when you're eating pizza. And I think you're gonna like it a lot better. I've done it both ways. My family prefers it with a little bit of sugar inside there. The Italians would tell you, put that sugar away. It's supposed to be just be flour and yeast and some oil. We'll get to the oil next. All right, so that's in there. Sugar's ready to go. Next up, you gotta salt your dough. If you don't salt your dough, it's not gonna taste like anything, right? So we gotta put some salt inside of that. It's gonna feel like a lot of salt, but you're gonna put 2 full teaspoons of salt into this, okay? 2 full teaspoons. This is just iodized salt. This is nothing fancy. It's not sea salt, it's not anything else. It's just good old-fashioned salt. This salt's gonna go in here. There's 1 teaspoon. All right, pour yourself another one. It's okay if it's a little heaping too, no big deal. It doesn't have to be level, this isn't fancy. Right, making dough the first time, it's not fancy. You just gotta put it together and get the right dampness to it. That's right, dampness. It's gotta be a little bit wet and a little bit dry at the same time, all right? So here we go, we got the salt, we've got the sugar, we've got the flour, we've got the yeast. Last thing we gotta add is some oil, okay? This oil is gonna help add some texture to it. This is some good olive oil. This is the stuff from Aldi. It's not that expensive, right? You can use just about any, but I don't recommend stuff that's overpowering taste-wise. Right, so if you've got that super, super strong oil, you're gonna taste that in your dough. This is just a good old-fashioned olive oil. Some people like extra light olive oil. You do what you got in the cupboard. It's not a big deal. If you don't have olive oil, you can use a little bit of vegetable oil. It's not a big deal. For some reason, this helps. Just like just like oil does with waffles too. You gotta have a little bit of this. It's gonna add some flavor to it, add some fat to the dough. For whatever reason, this is gonna help it become a little more stretchy. It's gonna help form some of all that gluten happening. We're in good shape. We're gonna put 4 tablespoons of this stuff in here. That's the big one, right? So I'm gonna put 4 of those into the same bowl. There's 1, there's 2, 3, 4. All right, I got 4 tablespoons in there. Next up, we have to wait. Making dough is a waiting game. I'm gonna stir this around a little bit with my last tablespoon thing. We're gonna mix this around, because what's gonna happen is that dough, or the yeast I have in there that's gonna help the dough out, needs to activate, okay? So that dough needs to, yeast needs to activate. You'll notice it will start activating when this starts looking really creamy, like a glass of milk will, okay? But then around the edges of this glass of milk, if you will, is gonna be a little bit clear and there's some bubbles going on. You're gonna see some stuff starting to happen. That yeast is waking up and it's gonna start spitting out some of that carbon dioxide and creating those little bubbles. That's good, we want that. It takes about 5 minutes. So I'm gonna stop the video right now and we're gonna come back when those 5 minutes are ready. All right guys, so we got the video here pointed at the bowl so you can see what's going on. First of all, oil and water don't mix, right? So what you're seeing on top is the olive oil, the water's underneath it, but you are seeing some cool things happen. Before, when it looked all like just solid milk, when we had things mixed together, now you're starting to kind of see this ring form. So this ring that you're seeing right here is the activated yeast. It's causing the bubbles to start forming. You can see there's bubbles there, there's some bubbles there, and you're starting to see more activation. This is enough. You can activate that enough. That's pretty good. We're ready to go. You can wait just a little bit longer too. Okay, but we're gonna want all of this stuff to start interfering now with the flour. So we're gonna do that. So I'm gonna show you a couple of things and how this is gonna work. First thing we're gonna do is add the flour. And we're gonna add 6 whole cups of all-purpose flour. Nothing fancy. You're welcome to use fancier stuff like bread dough, or bread flour, excuse me. Bread flour actually has a little bit more protein in it. And the more protein causes a little more gluten, so it'll make it a little bit chewier. You're welcome to do that, but since I'm keeping things simple, I think using just good old-fashioned all-purpose flour, cheap and simple, is a way to go here. All right, so here we go. We're gonna add 6 cups. You don't have to be like super fancy when you put these in, okay? Oftentimes what I'll do is round the tops off so there's actually more than 6 cups, and that's okay too. So you're gonna kind of see me put them in. That's about a cup. I'm happy with that, right? Tap that in. 1, a little too big. I don't care. 2, 3, 4, 2 more, 5, and 6. Now some people will say, hey, now's a good time to add other flavors in if you want to mix them in. I personally am not a huge fan of adding a lot of extra flavors like garlic or rosemary or other things into the dough at this point. I like to put that in my sauce so that the bread's just bread, right? And so that your crust just tastes like crust. You don't have to worry about it tasting like other things. However, my family does enjoy having flaxseed in theirs. So sometimes I'll put milled flaxseed inside. And that milled flaxseed, I'll usually put it in right now before I mix it. Milled flaxseed, flaxseed's got extra fat in it a little bit, but it's kind of crunchy. I'm not sure if that'll show up on camera if I show it in front of you. But this is the stuff that I buy at Aldi. Can you see that okay? Milled flaxseed, so it's got some extra things in there that are good for your body too, but you don't have to. It certainly does not add any crunch or any difference. It will make it look a little bit more like wheat flour though, okay? So milled flaxseed is something I like to add. I'll usually put a half cup at most, right? So somewhere between a quarter cup and a half cup, but I'm not going to in this batch, okay? So now I'm ready. So at this point I could take my spoon and I can start going nuts on stirring this thing. Here's my spoon, okay? Oftentimes I'll use something like that. It's not a wooden spoon. Mine's plastic, or that's okay, just so I can get the dough off a little easier and it washes nicely. But since I'm using my fancy stand mixer here, I actually have something called a bread dough hook, right? So this is my dough hook. So I put my dough hook on. I'm gonna go ahead and secure that down. And now what you're gonna see is kind of the side here. I'm gonna show you what's happening as the dough as I mix. Couple of quick things. This is dough, right? Be gentle, be careful, be slow. Okay? If you go too fast, you're gonna have flour all up in your face. All right, so I'm putting mine on my lower speed, and you're starting to see things move around a little bit, but nothing really is happening a lot, not until you get some of that water and that flour combined. And then you're gonna start seeing it getting sticky and clumping. That's good, we want that. Now I've got my head locked down on this one right now. If I didn't, it would actually sometimes pop back up because it's almost too much for my little stand mixer to do a full 6 cups.
All right, so now you're starting to see it stick together. You're seeing the flour jump a little bit out of there. That's okay, that's good. You can speed it up a little bit now because now the wet is starting to mix with the dry and it's starting to stick together well. So I'm gonna speed it up a little bit, okay? Letting the dough hook do all the work for me. I've already got big enough muscles, can't improve on this, right? The dough hook's doing the work. Okay, starting to do a better job. You're seeing it stick together a little bit more. It's slowing my mixer down a little bit. I'm gonna crank it up another notch. Okay, I'm gonna slow that thing down and I'm just gonna show you what it looks like a little bit. So I'm gonna pull this part up and you see how it's all sticky and starting to stretch out a little bit like this? Totally okay, we want that. And in fact, we're gonna hit this thing again with the mixer one last time. But if it is not thicker and it's not, like right now it's sticky, which is totally okay. We want a little bit of sticky. But if this is just soft and like flowing and oozing off of this too much, you can add more flour, right? So you can just take your flour and you can add some more to it. No big deal, it doesn't change the texture at this point. So we add more flour to it if needed, okay? So you can kind of be the judge of that. You're gonna do this a lot, right? If it's too thick, like if it's too dry at this point, and it's so stuck on here that nothing can be like stretched or moved, add a little more water, right? So that's the big game we play here, is add a little more water to make it a little bit more wet, add a little more flour to make it a little more dry until you feel it makes a good dough. You're gonna do this enough, because you're gonna love these grilled pizzas, that you're gonna get to know your dough well. And you'll know when it feels ready and it feels good and it's happy to go. So I'm gonna stick this back in here and I'm gonna crank this one more time. Okay. All right, now I'm seeing all the dough kind of stuck together. It's looking good. I'm gonna pop this up. Now sometimes it's really, really sticky, and if you get stuck to your hands and you don't like having it all stuck on there, one thing you can do is you can get a little bit of olive oil out, okay? And you actually are gonna have to knead this anyway in a second. So what I usually do is I pour my olive oil out on the surface, just a little bit on the surface, and what I do is I take my hands now so they don't stick to the dough and actually put them in the olive oil to spread out my olive oil. So I got a nice oiled surface to work on my bread. And now my hands have the olive oil on them. What I'm gonna do is pick this dough out of this thing so it doesn't stick as well. You'll notice, look, my hands aren't sticking to it. It's lovely now. This dough is good and soft. It's not too hot yet. That's good too, because sometimes when the dough is too hot, it just is really, really sticky. I'm gonna move my bread hook out of the way and just take that out. Okay, and now I'm literally gonna just grab my dough here and I'm gonna kind of scrape it off the bottom. So I'm gonna do a little self-kneading on this, a little kneading on the, look at that, okay? And I can tell that this dough isn't too soft because I'm able to hold it and it's oozing a little bit, but it's not everywhere, okay? Plop that on my surface, okay? If you got any dough left in the bottom of your bowl, go ahead and pull that out too. It'll recombine, trust me on this. All right, so we got the dough sitting here on my oiled surface, ready to go, and you can see that it's not running to falling apart. It's not running apart. In fact, you can pull it up a little bit now, and you can see that it's kind of, it's hard to describe. If you ever worked with Play-Doh, it's way softer than Play-Doh, all right? And it's gonna get softer as it gets as it starts rising some more. But I generally refrigerate mine overnight, so it gets softer, but it also is gonna stay stiffer because of the cold. All right, so we're gonna knead this a little bit, and there's lots of ways to knead things. People get super fancy with this, and they care about it an awful lot. I don't get super fancy. It's just a simple folding technique. What I do is I take it from the ends like so, and I kind of bring it out, and I kind of fold that part in, and then I push that down a little bit, and I take this part and fold it in, okay? Then I take this part kind of like I would a diaper, and I bring that over like so, okay? And you can see that where that oil was and where that's kind of the dough is smoothing out, we want that kind of surface when we're done, okay? So if you don't have a nice kind of smooth textured surface, you're gonna keep kneading that until it's ready. But that's only the first part. We're gonna keep going with that one. So I can repeat that process, kind of in from the side. You wanna stretch it out maybe a little bit, kind of in from the side, and you're pushing down, and then I go in the opposite direction this time, kind of fold it over. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll flip it over, just kind of see how we're doing, and I'll push it out. There's really no like super like fancy technique for this, but then you can see now I'm kind of stretching the top of it. I'm trying to get that top part to look nice and smooth. I'm not quite ready for that yet because it was falling apart. Okay, so fold it in a few times. This is just a process of kneading the dough out, okay? And then I'm gonna get some oil back on this on both sides. Okay, now that I'm on this side, I'm kind of tucking the bottom parts under, stretching that top part out, right? Now it looks like a good piece of dough. It's ready to go, right? But it needs raising, right? It needs raising. So we're not ready to cook with this yet. So it's gonna go back in the bowl, but so it doesn't stick to the bowl later, usually I grab a little bit of my olive oil and I make sure I rub the inside of my bowl. I've since cleaned the inside of my bowl, so the rest of the dough is gone now, so that's nice and clean. I'm gonna take my olive oil, or I got this nice olive oil spray I pick up super cheap at Aldi as well, and I spray the inside of my bowl with my olive oil spray, so it's not gonna stick later. Okay, then I'm gonna grab my dough, keeping that nice bottom part right there, right? I'm gonna just plop that in, and it's gonna do all the raising now in the bowl. I also don't want whatever's in my refrigerator to fall in this. I don't want bugs in this. I don't keep bugs in the fridge, but I don't want stuff to fall in there, whatever else is in there. I also, if I'm gonna keep it outside on the counter, or if I'm only letting it raise for a couple of hours, like if I would if on a warm day, okay, I'm just gonna cover it so we don't get stuff in there, okay? So a little Reynolds wrap here, a little plastic wrap, got that on there, ready to go. Okay, one thing, because we had an oiled surface, this is gonna be fine, but if you didn't oil this very well, sometimes that dough will stick to your wrap on the top. You can spray the wrap too if you want to as well, but I don't have to spray mine because I've already got oil on it. So it's ready, this is ready, I'm ready to let it sit overnight. So I'm gonna put this right into my refrigerator, and then tomorrow we're gonna pull it out and we're gonna separate it into the balls, and we're gonna roll this out into what will be the